Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. Hope you're all doing very well today. I've got the afternoon free, and I got a video already recorded today, and I was like, sweet, that's done. Now I can play a quick game or two. But you know what? I'm making time for a second video. How much do you love me? How much do you love me? We're squeezing in two videos today. Feels good. So yeah, if you would like to support this content, the regularity and the quality of it, please consider visiting my Patreon page. The link is in the description below. We've already got some pretty spicy tier rewards up and running, and we are considering doing more. Right now, a big attraction, any Patreon, any supporter gets access to the once per month scouting reports, where we go as deep as humanly possible into an opposing archetype. Patrons will get to vote on which ones, but we'll probably just be starting off, for the most part, with the most popular archetypes. We're going to get in the shoes of the opponent, and that stuff is Patreon exclusive. And yeah, so I'm also considering more rewards. We're considering a Patreon-only Discord. We're considering all kinds of stuff, and you can get in on the ground floor and help shape the direction of the channel. I'm very open-minded. We're also in talks about some cards through the mail type shenanigans. All kinds of fun stuff might be coming down the pipeline. But for now, yeah, I'd really appreciate it if you would check out the Patreon page and consider supporting this content. So, we are playing some more Golgari. As you can tell, we're still on the Dark Confidant list that I've featured in the deck tech from yesterday. So this is a Bob list, but Bobby is not present in our opening hand. We are on the draw. Let's see if our opponent will keep 7. Sure. Our hand is fine, but slow. On the draw, we're already a little bit slower than on the play, at the risk of stating the obvious, but we are on the draw, and our hand would be slow even if we're on the play, because of course, most matchups we don't want to turn 2 trophy, so realistically we're not doing much besides deploying a treetop village in the first couple turns, and then, turn 3 Liliana or Maelstrom Pulse. No matter what the opponent's up to, one of those should be good. So, our hand is functional, it's got the raw power, that is for sure, but it is on the slow side. I'm not super thrilled about this keep, but in a blind game 1, I certainly don't think we can mull it. So, opponent will lead us off. Oh no, it is an Urza's Mine into Chromatic Sphere, so this is our nemesis. This is Tron, mono green Tron probably. Eldrazi Tron decks and blue Tron decks will both generally not be playing Chromatic Sphere. This could be like red-green or black-green Tron, but this looks like at least some form of traditional Tron, which, despite the fact that we have Assassin's Trophy, is still kind of a boogeyman matchup for us. It's not as bad as it used to be, and it's not as bad as a deck like Titan Shift, but it's still pretty bad. We draw another creature land. That's not really what we need, but sure, I guess we'll take it. Still want to play the Treetop Village, because if we can only deploy 1 man land in the first few turns, which it looks like is going to be the case because we're potentially trophying next turn, we're certainly playing something on 3. We want it to be the Treetop because we need to clock Tron as quickly as possible. There may come a point at some point in the game where we need to turn a man land sideways. We haven't had a chance to play another one yet. So we play our most powerful one first. Opponent has a power plant in hand, and they're going to crack the Sphere for Ancient Stirrings. This is looking pretty bad for us. And they reveal an Urza's Tower. So yep, they just have Tron ready for turn 3. We draw an Inquisition, which is not bad, but a little late for it, because we of course just have to trophy. We just have to trophy them. We're going to take away the power plant because they played it second, meaning I guess it's more likely they have a redundant mine in hand, but that is still a guessing game to some degree, of course. So yeah, we just had no choice but to trophy there. Now the good news is we were able to trophy. This card lets us game 1 on the draw and disrupt turn 3 Tron. The only thing that could do that before, realistically, was Ghost Quarter, which of course is very bad in the sense that it puts us down a land. Still a playable card in Golgari. There are still some people who play Ghost Quarter Rock, Definitely not trying to dismiss that, but certainly comes with its downsides, that is for sure. So here, we have to spend a spell to do so, but we still get to disrupt Tron, stay even on lands. And our opponent just plays that tower they found off of Stirrings, and they will pass. We draw another Liliana of the Veil, so it's kind of tempting to Inquisition here, but most of the payoffs we'd want to take are only reachable with Thoughtseize, so I think it's time to just get really proactive, play the Liliana. We're going to be mana efficient, we're going to at least take something out of their hand, and we're going to force them to have, some way to deal with this Liliana, or to manage her. So here we definitely want to pitch a land. Next turn, Inquisition might be live. We certainly want to keep a redundant copy of Lily. This is a game where we don't want to throw away our second Lily lightly, in my opinion, at least not right out of the gates. Of course, Maelstrom Pulse is awesome. If they have Tron into a payoff, or even if they don't have Tron, they play like an Oblivion Stone, we got to keep this. So we're going to pitch a land. Hissing Quagmire is okay. It's actually not bad at playing defense if they have exactly one threat and it's a creature. But, yeah, I still think we pitch that over the swamp here because we could potentially have a double spell turn next turn. But, could go either way with that. Opponent will pitch a forest. And we will pass. So, let's see what they've got. Sanctum of Ugin. Okay, that's not the missing Tron piece. Very strong land in their deck, but not the missing Tron piece. What costs 4 mana? I was afraid of 3, maybe O-Stone, but okay. Walking Ballista on 2. That's not a bad play for them at all. This is going to really heavily pressure the Liliana, and for that reason, we're going to draw Twilight Mire, huh? Okay, so we could do one of two things here. We can tick up the Lily, try to kind of ignore the Walking Ballista, but that's not very good, because even if they don't have anything else, like no land, no payoff card, nothing, they can just put a counter on the Ballista, make it a 3/3, attack the Lily, then ping her to death. We would have another one in hand, but still, I think I would rather be proactive and get this thing off the field now, especially because we just drew a Twilight Mire for turn, which is not very good. So, we could Maelstrom Pulse the Ballista, it'll ping the Lily in response, then we tick her up and she's at 3. And we don't have a Pulse in hand. That's not very good, so it's better to... Well, first I guess we'll Inquisition. Let's see what they have. They have another tower, another forest, Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, Ugin the Spirit Dragon, so if they ever reach Tron, we are pretty much just simply dead. Good to know, good to know. Not entirely unexpected. And, yep, so Inquisition whiffs. And yeah, so the play here is to Edict away the Walking Ballista. It, of course, gets to ping Liliana in response, removing her entirely. That's why that was a really good play for them. But we get to play out our second Liliana. Very glad we hung on to her. We get to tick up, and we're at 1 higher loyalty than we would have been if we took the other line. If we had pulsed the Ballista pings Lily twice in response. We tick her up, she's only at 3. Here, their Lily gets to sit at 4, which could definitely matter. And of course, we pitch our extra land here. Maelstrom Pulse is still really a card we want to hang on to. If we have to pitch it to keep our Lily ticking toward ultimate next turn, we'll pitch it. But for now, we're going to hang. And yeah, we'll pass. If opponent rips a Tron land, we are basically just dead, but they don't. They have Urza's Tower. Okay. And pass. Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is potentially a nice draw here, so let's start off on that. They found a Karn Liberated, so definitely have all the payoffs they could ever ask for. We'll just take the one that is easiest for them to hardcast. I think that's pretty clearly here. We're pretty dead to any of them, frankly, so we will go ahead and tick the Liliana up, advancing her toward ultimate, getting another win condition out of their hand, advancing our own, and of course, getting to fire up the Treetop Village and cracking in for 3. This does not look like a game where we're going to win by attacking. Looks like we're going to need to Lily them out of the game, but if we get a Lily ult off and if they stick in the game, if they keep playing it out, then we'll have to clock them somehow, so we might as well start now. Opponent looks like they're thinking about playing something, thinking about not. And they will pass. Okay. Interesting. So, Scavenging Ooze is a little bit of a mediocre draw. It's something that we should play out, but it's not that great in the matchup, and it, of course, is just costs enough where we cannot animate our Treetop Village this turn, but I still think we're supposed to play it, right? It's definitely better against, something like Karn. We are just dead to the Ugin, as always, but sure. Scoos and then take the Lily up. She's at 6. Wow, okay. They keep the Ugin in hand and they pitch Oblivion Stone, so that's what they thought about playing last turn. Now, man, if they had played that last turn, we might be in some real trouble. I guess I understand why they didn't play it, because they were potentially a little bit afraid of us drawing a Pulse or a Decay or a Trophy. We have a lot of draws, so if they play that out, we top deck one of our pieces of non-creature removal. We get to kill the Yostone before they pop it. We get to get this Ugin out of their hand, and then we get to ult the Lily the next turn. So I certainly understand why they held that. That said, if they had played it out, of course we don't have an answer to it. They would get to crack it this turn. Yeah, that would have been pretty bad for us. Then it's just kind of a top deck war, and we just have the Treetop Village, and yeah, that's not great. But as it is, they give themselves the chance to rip a Tron land, the missing Tron piece here, and just play Ugin and win. Doesn't look like they have that. So they're just going to pass no land drop. Alright, I'm going to gobble up a couple of creatures in the end step. No reason not to. It advances our clock, all that good stuff. Dark Confidant. Kind of in the Scoos category of it's a little awkward that we should probably play it. But hey, you know what? We got to the Lily ult threshold, so I certainly won't complain. Let's just ult them. I think we're just supposed to ult them here. Double Stone Rain is totally fine. I made the piles this way. You certainly have to separate the Tron lands, and so I just went, sure, 2 towers on one side and all the others on the other. And that's just going to cause our opponent to scoop. Wow, okay, so, the game was not technically over, but of course we have them on a 3-turn clock on the board. Yeah, no other creatures to eat. So yeah, 3-turn clock on the board, hit for 7, hit for 7, hit for 7, but of course we would have gone hit for 4, play the Confidant, and then from there, who knows. But yeah, our opponent, after we just Lily ult them out of the game, they're just going to scoop it up, basically. So I understand the upsides to them not playing the Oblivion Stone. Again, the big blowout would have been they play O-Stone, we rip a piece of removal for it, we kill the O-Stone, we get the Ugin out of their hand, and we have Lily ready to ult the following turn, whereas this way, they gave themselves a chance to hit, I guess, let's see. Obviously, drawing Urza's Power Plant would have done it. Drawing a Sylvan Scrying would have done it. They go get the Power Plant, they play it, they play the Ugin. Yeah, they definitely had the things. They definitely had a lot of chances to rip exactly what they needed off the top, or perhaps a cantrip into what they needed. Ancient Stirrings, of course, things like this, they're all pretty live. So I understand not playing around, not getting blown out there, and trusting in the top deck. Especially because the payoff they were protecting was the best one against us. Ugin the Spirit Dragon is definitely a card that we can almost never beat when it resolves, unless we just have, the ability to both answer it immediately and rebuild well afterwards, and they don't have a follow-up, So if the resources and the board states are anywhere near even and they play an Ugin, we're pretty dead. So I certainly understand them playing the way they did. That said, if they had just ran out the O-Stone and forced us to have something, we would not have had it, and the game would have gone on, and I think they would have been pretty significantly favored. That said, I will certainly not complain. We got Tron on the draw when they had turn 3 Tron fully assembled and ready to roll. Our new tech Assassin's Trophy disrupted them just enough. And then Liliana of the Veil, of course, did all the heavy lifting. The Thoughtseize here was pretty nice, but Lily of the Veil running them out of resources and eventually ending the game for all intents and purposes with an ultimate that would have been a double Stone Rain at worst. And then we had enough cards to put the game away. You know, our opponent saw Village and Skoos. We had a Confidant in hand that our opponent just scooped to that. So, yeah, Assassin's Trophy gave us a chance, and then Liliana of the Veil won the game for us. So, very happy to sneak a game 1 against Tron. That is always a wonderful, wonderful thing. The post-board games get better for us, but the Tron decks usually have some pretty good stuff to bring in on you know, in their own right. So let's go to game 2 and see how we do on the draw. Alright, my friends, game 2 on the draw against Mono Green Tron, and our opponent has kept 7, which is never great. They kept 7 game 1. We want to see them mulligan. They do mulligan well, but we want to see them mulligan. They will not oblige. So, we have a hand that's a bit of a mess. We don't have any forms of land destruction. No Field of Ruin, no Assassin's Trophy, no Fulminator Mage is no good. Is no good. We have Surgical Extraction, which is a nice piece in conjunction with those, but we don't have that. And the hand in general is just a mess, right? We only have 2 lands. One enters, you know, our black one ETB's tapped, so even if we top deck like a Thoughtseize for our turn 1, we can't use it. Nissa she comes in, but she's not great in the matchup. Like, she's fine in certain situations where if they have 1 payoff and it's like a Karn, you know, let's say they have like a turn 5 Karn and they exile 1 thing, we can play the Nissa, take her up, pressure the Karn off the board, and then have a big threat. Like, she's fine, but she's not like a great card to see in your opening hand against Tron. She comes in partially because she fulfills some decent roles, and partially because we have a lot of bad stuff to bring out. Some of the bad stuff we bring out is also Fatal Push. Like, I leave some number of these in because it is now realistic for us to battle through Wormcoil engines after Trophy. At least 1 Wormcoil engine, and so I retain access to maybe a couple Fatal Push, but again, it's not a card I really want to see. You know, Confidant, Goyf, these things are fine, but not really without the interaction to survive. So I'm going to go down to 6. Now, I like this 6 a whole heck of a lot better. We've got a real curve, Thoughtseize into Bob into Lily. This is where it's at. We've got the lands to play them. We definitely don't have any land destruction, though, and that's a big, big weakness of this hand, but I don't think I can go to 5. I don't think I can throw this back. We're going to have to hope this Thoughtseize cripples them long enough for us to stabilize. Either that or hope they just don't have Tron. Urza's Mine, Expedition Map. Alright, well, that's a pretty good start to having Tron. We draw Verdant Catacombs. Not great. Not great. At least it ensures we'll be able to play everything on curve if we want to, but yeah, we're kind of depending on them not having it right now, and wow. Not only do they have turn 1 map, they also just have natural Tron in hand. So, you know, I lamented the lack of land destruction, but it turns out that they would have some real resilience against that. Not only do they have natural Tron plus a map, they also have a Sylvan Scrying. Granted, they don't have green mana yet, but natural Tron plus 2 land tutor pieces is quite resilient against land destruction effects, and Ancient Stirrings can also, of course, find a land if need be, but right now it looks like they'd be using that, again, once they get green mana to find a payoff card. So here, the clear take is Wormcoil Engine, because it's one of the most dangerous payoff cards against us anyway. And now, you know, at least for now, their hand does not have a threat, and they have no way to dig for one until they find green. So, okay, the Thoughtseize was pretty good there. That said, we still, we have to fade a lot of top decks, that is for sure. They're going to play a power plant, and they will pass. And we're just drawing more lands that are not named Field of Ruin, so that's pretty bad. Of course, here we're going to play the Dark Confidant. Go get a land, play the Bob, pass to you. Okay, opponent does not crack the Expedition map in the end step, so that's not very mana efficient, but I guess they're about to have Tron, so they don't need to be mana efficient, so that's one thing. And that this also just gives them more insulation against any land destruction effects. Like, for all they know, we have Field of Ruin and Fulminator Mage in hand, you know? So I think that's a pretty canny play from them. I'm no Tron expert, so I don't know how, you know, if that's nailed on correct or anything, but I think it's pretty solid play. This can't be good. Okay, opponent plays a 3/3 Walking Ballista. You know, that's not the end of the world. It's obviously really nice because it gets to kill this Bob, then stick around and take over the game if we let it stick. But, of course, we're not going to let it stick. You know, it feels bad. We just have to play the Liliana and edict this thing away before it gets too big. Of course, it gets to answer her in response, so that's a really nice... They get to 2-for-1 us. They get to ping us for 1 on top of that. Very, very nice for them, but... As far as payoff cards go, not the worst. Not the worst for us. They find a Forest, which is actually pretty good here, because then they get to hit a Stirrings. But Stirrings only, the best they can do is an Urza's Tower, so their hand still seems to lack a payoff. They do have 1 unknown, but yeah, no follow-up play, so hand is without a payoff, it seems. We draw Fulminator Mage. Actually not the most exciting here, even though it would often be in this matchup, obviously. I still think we're supposed to just play it and immediately Stone Rain something, you know. We're just forcing them to use their, you know, Expedition map is kind of like a regeneration shield in a weird way for that land. We're just chewing through the redundancy. I don't think clocking with a 2/2 there is the play. I think we're supposed to just keep destroying lands and hope we can keep fading payoffs until we can get something good going. So, yep, there's another piece of redundancy expended, and back to us. Okay, Tireless Tracker is not that bad of a draw here at all. We get to play her out, we get to make a clue, and we get to hold up the clue. I guess we bluff Assassin's Trophy here as well. They play out a Ghost Quarter. They play out an Expedition map. They've got all the ramp in the world and all the land tutor pieces in the world, but still no payoff, so we have a glimmer of hope here. This can happen to the Tron deck. They pay the price for being so consistent with making sure they assemble Tron that sometimes that's all they really do. Now, to be fair to them, they have found 2 payoffs already, but we dealt with both of them, so we gave ourselves a window to compete in this game, at least. Our draws have been pretty miserable, though. Like, Tireless Tracker was good, but too many lands, and then Fatal Push. Tarmogoyf's not bad. Tarmogoyf is definitely not bad. We're obviously going to play the Tarmogoyf this turn, so we might as well crack a clue first, see if we get anything else interesting. Another Tarmogoyf. Well, sadly, we're just a little bit shy of running both of them out, so let's get in with a Tireless Tracker. Hits the opponent for 5. We're going to play out a 5/5. Opponent's going to go fetch a Sanctum of Ugin. Sure, makes sense at this stage of the game. If they ever do find a payoff, they can go get another one when they cast it. So we don't quite have lethal on board. Even if we top deck an untapped land, we cannot quite activate both Quagmires. So maybe a fetch land would be lethal if we go fetch again. Even that is not quite lethal, because we still... Yep, okay. So we're not going to have lethal next turn, it appears. They play out the Sanctum of Ugin. And they found an Ugin. Ugin and his Sanctum are definitely going to be too much for us to beat. I'll play it out for maybe a turn, but yeah, they go get an Ulamog. They get to wipe away our board here. Basically, we need to draw an answer off the top to Ugin right now in order to not scoop. And it's a Treetop Village. Good game, well played. Cannot beat the Ugin almost ever. You know, again, we would have needed to have an answer right away and then be able to rebuild. And does Tarmogoyf count as a rebuilding? Kind of, you know, it's a really good clock. But that still leaves us so cold to so many top decks. And of course, we know they have the Ulamog in hand. Yeah, that was just perfectly fine to scoop it up there, no question in my mind. We were resoundingly defeated. So, interestingly, we made a game of it, though. That Thoughtseize was pretty crippling. They did find a payoff card kind of right away. They had a turn 3 Walking Ballista, which was a sufficient payoff to deal with both Bob and Liliana. That said, we at least kept their payoffs from snowballing out of control. They bricked on finding payoffs for another few turns. We were able to establish a board, and then they just found a Nugan, and the game just ended. That's how Tron is. That's what Tron does. So, we had an alright display, considering the fact that, we mulliganed and all that good stuff. It was at least a reasonable game. It was at least a game. And, we were not able to do it. The Ugin got us, but let's go to Game 3, see if we can get him while we are on the play. Okay, everybody, Game 3 against Tron, and I like R7. I like it a lot. Thoughtseize is such a good card in the matchup, and we have 2 of them. We can open on one turn 1, and then if we need to or want to, we can follow up with a second one on turn 2 and play our Quagmire, or we can try to curve out by going, turn 2 Bob into, maybe Quagmire into Thoughtseize turn 3, or we can Field of Ruin turn 3 if we need to. We have a late game threat plus card advantage engine. Confidant, of course, is going to be a card advantage engine in his own right. So we have interaction of the type we need. We are on the play. I like it. I like it a lot. Would be nice to see a Fulminator here, but will not complain. Now, our opponent has kept 7 all 3 games. I just want to point this out. Tron decks mulligan a fair amount of the time. Of course, we prey upon decks when they mulligan because our discard can be that much more crippling when they are down cards to begin with. That said, sometimes Tron just has great 7s throughout the whole match, and it seems like the case here. So we will Thoughtseize them. Alright, this isn't a great 7, it's definitely a fine one, but it's not great. Probably better to keep this than to mulligan to 6 against a discard deck. So they have Forest and Tower for their lands. They don't have a map, but they do have a Sylvan Scrying, and they do have a cantrip in the form of Sphere. And they have kind of 2 big, monstrous, hard-to-beat payoff cards, and then one of these cards that are of the type they'll bring in against us. So most Tron decks are going to have stuff like Thought-Knot Seer, Thragtusk. They even have sometimes been known to steal our Tarmogoyfs, which is just totally blasphemous. They play them in the side, they bring them in against us. So they know that we can disrupt their assemblage of Tron. They also know that we are a fair value-oriented deck that likes to exchange resources. So cards like Thought-Knot Seer, Thragtusk, and Tarmogoyf, they compete well against us, and they can be hard cast reasonably even if they don't manage to get Tron online. So that's why you'll see cards like this. You can expect to see some number of those types of cards in against you when you play against Tron post-side. So what do we take here? Well, we could take Sylvan Scrying and kind of try to land screw them. That's a reasonable line in my opinion. I don't like taking the Chromatic Sphere here. It's just less impactful than Scrying. Unless we wanted to go all in on that strategy, but then we would be forced to Thoughtseize next turn. We'd take the Sphere this turn, the Scrying next turn. That can just go so wrong in so many ways. We just haven't developed our board at all. They're gonna probably have a turn 4 Thought-Knot Seer no matter what we do if we don't be more proactive. So I don't think we take Sphere. I think we could take Scrying, or we could start eating away at the win conditions. And these win conditions are pretty scary, because it's realistic that the game will still be ongoing by turn 6, and they can just hardcast these things even if we disrupt Tron heavily. So I chose to start going after the win conditions, and I took away a Wormcoil Engine. Perhaps a debatable line, but I think the correct one. Opponent will go Forest into Sphere as expected, unless maybe they drew an Expedition map for a turn or something like that, but otherwise that's what we anticipated. Alright, Overgrown Tomb is a fine draw. It means we're going to be able to curve out pretty comfortably no matter what else we find and what else we want to do. We don't have to expose our Field of Ruin yet, and we get to play our Confidant. Sweet, I like it. I like it. Opponent will play the tower that we knew about. Ooh, they have a map this turn, so no Sylvan Scrying, they're going to play the map instead. Do they have anything else? It does not appear that they do. Alright, fair enough. Dark Confidant is going to find us Assassin's Trophy, and we have Tireless Tracker as well. Okay. So. Trackers are looking a little bit clunky here. And so is our land base, because we cannot both Trophy and Thoughtseize this turn, because Field of Ruin is colorless. So what do? Well, my first thought is, alright, we can play the Field of Ruin, we can field their tower, and then we can Thoughtseize them. That's a really mana-efficient turn. The big problem with that is it gives them an untapped land and lets them crack this Expedition map, and lets them be mana-efficient too. And they're not going to have Tron next turn, so there's actually no hurry to start employing our land destruction quite yet. That still wouldn't be a bad play, but I think we can do better. Now, the same applies to Assassin's Trophy. Trophying away a land does not feel great, because again, it gives them an untapped source. They can go get something with the map. And of course, the same thing applies to trophying the map or the sphere. Like, yeah, they don't get to tutor if we hit the map, but they still get to get a land. That's actually pretty bad. So, as much good interaction as we have, I don't think we can start destroying anything this turn. So we're just going to Thoughtseize instead. We're going to Thoughtseize them, see what else they found. They found a Karn Liberated. That is a good one for sure. But I'm just going to take the other Wormcoil engine. I think Karn is a little bit more beatable than Wormcoil on average for our deck. And of course, Wormcoil comes down a turn earlier if they're just hardcasting things without Tron online. So, that is the play. Kind of a turn that feels a little bit suboptimal, but I think was actually the best we could do. We don't want to force these effects when we don't need them quite yet and when they have downsides. We want to use them when their downsides are minimal. So, we had a mana inefficient turn, but so did they. We got to continue accruing card advantage. We got to take another Wormcoil out. We got to attack for 2. We got to deploy a Quagmire. Like, that turn was just fine. So, they'll begin by cracking a sphere, and then they will use that mana for the Sylvan Scrying. Looks like they're just digging for a land with a sphere. They didn't find one, so they have to go get one. And they'll play it. Sure, you got it. Alrighty, so Dark Confidant. Our life total is down to 9, you know. I'm not used to this, guys. I'm not used to this. I'm used to the Taziger, who never hurts me. But Bob is doing all kinds of work here. He's found us 2 cards already. He's starting the clock as a mighty 2-1. You know, I love it. I love living on the edge. And of course, we can afford to sink really low with our life total here in this matchup, right? So, all good. So we find another trophy and a Tarmogoyf. So these trophies are making our hand look really, really powerful. And Tarmogoyf is also obviously a great one. But again, we are in the same situation this turn as we were last turn, where they have an awkward kind of like 1 mana open and nothing really to do with it in a map on field. So we don't really want to hit them with a trophy or a Field of Ruin, because that's going to give them the mana they need to crack the map and just let them be mana efficient. We don't want that. So, we do have to finally expose our Field of Ruin, but I think we're just going to use it to play the Tarmogoyf, develop our board, get the clock going. We're going to attack them for 2. Nothing here up the opponent's sleeve, I believe. Yep, Bob will get through. And then we're going to pass. So, I think, obviously we cannot afford to let them have Tron, so we have to trophy either upkeep or draw step. So I thought about draw stepping it, but then I was like, you know, they play a bunch of forests. We're not going to, you know, we're not going to get them by having them draw their last forest and then they don't have one to go get when we trophy them. They just have too many forests in the deck. That's never going to happen. So instead, I chose to upkeep the trophy so they have less information. with which to inform their decision. And here they have a decision. They have to decide whether they want to use this land before it's destroyed to go get something with the expedition map. And they will. Okay, this is fine for me. You know, it makes sense the opponent would do so. It's just the mana efficient thing to do. But now we know they won't be casting a Thought-Knot Seer this turn, which is pretty nice. So they go get a replacement tower, sure. There's a forest as well off the trophy, and they have an Oblivion Stone. Okay, that's a pretty scary one, but at least we have an answer to it in hand, right? Okay, Dark Confidant, flipping us a Field of Ruin. That's just really nice. It's obviously really good in the matchup. It's painless, and we were due for a painless hit, so good job, Bob. We draw Scavenging Ooze as well. That one's not so good. We're looking very threat-dense and not interaction-dense. Enough for our tastes, but we have a really good sequence of interaction this turn. So we get to go ahead and field away the Urza's Tower. We'll hit the tower here because there's already a tower in the yard, so they are less likely to naturally top deck a replacement. My understanding here is that you just want to keep going after the land you've started going after. So we'll go ahead and field a tower away. If we wanted to be really land destruction heavy, we could have tapped a different land and then fielded the Urza's power plant as well. But then, if they top deck a land, or if they have one in hand, next turn the Oblivion Stone can just wipe our board. And while we could potentially rebuild from that with our hand, and they're totally off Tron, you know, they just keep making land drops. They've got a Thought-Knot Seer, they've got a Karn. I don't like it. I think we need to end the game, so we're going to trophy away the Oblivion Stone, and that's just going to make our opponent scoop. Now, maybe they should have taken another draw step there, but, you know, we did have lethal on board. We're going to hit for 7 this turn, and then next turn we add the Hissing Quagmire, and that's exactly lethal. Now, it might not have panned out that way. They do have a Thought-Knot Seer to play and all that good stuff, but our opponent has just seen enough. They're never going to get to Tron because we've got another Field of Ruin, and, you know, we've got 3 cards in hand. We're drawing in 2 per turn thanks to Dark Confidant. You know, our opponent just doesn't see a way back, and, you know, again, I might have played it out at least one more turn if I were them, but hey, I'm not going to say no if they've seen too much land destruction and too much spot removal and too many Thought Seizes, and they've got a 5/6 Tarmogoyf breathing down their neck and they're getting buried in card advantage. Yeah, fair enough. I can see the scoop. So, all right, feels great. Feels great to get the win against Tron. We definitely had to work for it. Game 1, I was pleasantly surprised to steal the pre-board game from them. Game 2, I was never that optimistic, but we did manage to ride through a pretty strong progression from them, where they had a really resilient Tron combo assembled, if you will, and a couple early payoffs we were able to answer, and then we both kind of bricked for a little while. We've eventually found a little bit of gas, but then they just Ugand us out of the game, and that was that. And here we had double Thoughtseize, stripping away the Worm Coils, and, you know, if they still had those Worm Coils in hand, they definitely would not have scooped there, because they just have to make it to turn 6, and then they're potentially stabilized. So, definitely really leaned heavily on the Thoughtseizes there. Dark Confidant did a ton of work, helped start the clock off a little bit in his minor way, but more importantly was just churning through our deck in terms of finding cards. Assassin's Trophy, obviously huge. Field of Ruin, obviously huge. And then Tarmogoyf showing up at the right time to put to really crank up the clock and put our opponent under so much pressure that they just scooped it up after our flurry of interaction this turn. So, yeah, that is how we get wins against Tron. You really need a good blend of interaction and clock. And interaction often has to come both in the form of hand disruption and in the form of land destruction. We honestly need a little bit of everything in the right order and in the right proportions to beat Tron. if they're doing Tron things. Now, Tron is also a deck that can just mulligan to Oblivion and do nothing, cast no spells until they die. Like, that happens. Or they can mulligan to, like, an acceptable 5, and then one discard spell just breaks their back, and they just never recover. Again, I pointed this out earlier, I'll point it out again. Our opponent kept 7 all 3 games, and it was a good to very good 7 all 3 games. And we had some good draws too, and we had some reasonable progressions too, but we didn't not draw them or anything, you know. We only saw Fulminator Mage when it didn't matter anymore. It's not like we went Fulminator into Surgical and took them off Tron forever. You know, we didn't really have nut draws, so this just goes to show that if you know how to pilot the matchup, it is within reach for us. Now, it's not favorable. We are not favored, even post-side. In my opinion, it is still a tough matchup for us, but this is the beauty of Golgari, is that even one of the more unfavored matchups in the meta, one of the most unfavored, I dare say, is still not all that bad. It's still eminently beatable, so try not to get tilted when you see that turn 1 Urza's Mine into Expedition map. Just look at it this way, the pressure is off. You're on a fair mid-range deck, Tron is supposed to dumpster you, you're not expected to win. So the pressure is off, just relax, have a good time, and try to play to your outs. Your opponent might get sloppy because they are a little bit overconfident or what have you, and, you know, they're beatable. They really are beatable, and we showed it here. So good games, well played to the opponent. You know, Tron is not always the most fun matchup, and you know, sometimes they either just stomp you or you just stomp them. But all 3 of these games were quite reasonably fun and interactive and close. So this was a really good showcase for the matchup in general and how we are capable of taking it down as well. So as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Please do not forget to like the video, to subscribe to the channel if you've not already subscribed. And if you're interested, please visit my Patreon page. Link is in the description below, as always. So, yeah, good times here. Still loving Golgari. Bob showed up huge there. I'm warming to him, that is for sure. Definitely was a nice little display from the Confidant here. And, yeah, we'll keep experimenting with the Confidant. We'll keep playing some Taziger down the road as well. And we're going to all work together to find the best way forward for Golgari. So, thanks again, stay tuned to the channel, more gameplay to come, and have a great day. I will talk to you soon.